I came across this car yard, and in this car yard was this beautiful Vita with a Porsche kit, right? And the car salesman comes up to me and he goes, "Would you like to go for a drive?" So I thought, yeah, why not? I'll go for a drive in this cool car. So I jumped in the car. It felt fantastic. It was great. And at that moment, something switched in my brain, and I was still in the car. So I drove this car. I drove it hardcore, as far out, right? And then I'm just waiting till it was dark. As soon as the sun's gone down, it's time. So I've taken all the branches and everything off the car. I've driven into town. I've pulled into the gas station. I'm filling up. I'm just gonna fill this thing up and go, right? So I filled it up, jumped in the car, taken off. And as I'm going down the road, a cop car comes past. I thought, man, I'm done. This is it, I'm done, right? I'm totally done. So I've just, again, boom, something's clicked into another level of storytelling, and I'm into this movie. There was this old movie I watched as a kid, but he'd stolen this car and he was just taking uppers. And he's just driving this car right across America with these cops chasing him. In the end, he's so like tired from taking all these uppers and being awake for like a week with the cops chasing him. He's just driven off this new motorway that's been built, right? This freeway they hadn't finished it. He's like just driven off the end of it. That movie's come into my head, and I said, I'm him, I'm that character. So I've just floored it across the mountains, just driving as fast as I could in this movie. And the thing stuck to the road like, you know, it had racing tyres on it. It was amazing. And then I got to Sydney, I didn't see anybody. And there I was in Sydney. And I've called a friend of mine, Dana, and I said, Dana, I've got this car. I don't have anywhere to stick it. I know you got a garage. And I know it's empty. Do you mind if I leave the car in your garage? And she said, cool. So I left the car in the garage. And then I'd driven it around. I drove it around and around. The muffler fell off it. So I had to put it in. I had no money, right? So I just left it in the garage. And then one day, unbeknownst to me, the guy, Dana's flatmate, was from Bathurst. And this car belonged to his mate. And it had been for sale, you know, in consignment on the yard. And so he's gone down to get his golf clubs one day and he's seen this car. It's a one-off, you know what I mean? Like there's no other car like it. And he knew the car and he's gone, what's that doing here? And he's spoken to Dana and Dana said, oh, well, Jeffries has bought it, he's parking here. Well, said, that's my mate's car, he's stolen that. Dana said, you've got to come and meet me at this pub. She said, I've got to talk to you. And I said, okay. So I went to meet her at the pub and she came out the front, she goes, listen. She said, you've got to get out of here. She said, he's looking for you. She told the cops are looking for you, you've got to go. So we're in the cross, I went down, jumped on the train, caught the train out to Campbelltown. I'm on the road, the Hume Highway, thumb out. And finally, this beautiful nurse picked me up and she was moving down to Melbourne and we got on really well. She was older, but you know, we had a connection. And she took me back to her new flat and we had, you know, I stayed there for a little bit and you know, we enjoyed each other's company. And then obviously, you know, she was moving in, I couldn't stay there any longer, so I had to get out. So I'm in Melbourne. So I'm living on the streets in Melbourne. I remember it was a freezing cold night. I tried to walk into a Matthew Talbot. I'd been sleeping on this park bench and I was just cold and I was miserable. And, you know, I walked into this Matthew Talbot's and they were hosing down this old drunk guy with a hose who defecated himself. And it was just really, it was one of those moments was like, man, this is a living hell. And there've been times, you know, on the hitchhiking journey where we're in between rides where I just found myself sitting on the side of the road, just that huge feeling of dread had come over me and I'd be immobilized. I couldn't move from the depression or whatever that weight was, that feeling inside of me that was just insurmountable for me to actually even comprehend. And that feeling was there again as I was there in this Matthew Talbot. And I stayed the night in there and then the next day I thought something's got to change, right? And so I was walking past this CES and I just walked in there and I said, listen, I need to get a job. I'm homeless, I need to try and find a job. And so she gave me a couple of numbers and places to go and see. And one of them was this, I went out to Kensington it was in Melbourne that day. And I met this beautiful gentleman and he was running a mill. and he gave me a job. And the thing I've learned about life is that whenever I've asked for help, it's come. And there are angels everywhere. There are people that come into your life and will guide you and help you. And my life's a real example of that, right? And this was one of those moments. This guy was an incredible human being. He'd been in the Vietnam War, and he still wore his tags. And he was running this factory. He was the son. His father had started this factory, and he was running. It was a milling factory. And so I would work there, milling, bagging corn, bagging grain. It was a big mill. And he bought me a mattress. He bought me gave me a radio. He'd let me sleep in the factory. I listened to a radio at night. I remember listening to Kylie Minogue and Jason Donovan talking about neighbours. I would just stay up at night and listen to my little transistor radio. And I'd never been happier in my life. I felt really safe. I had somebody that had given me a bed. They'd given me money to feed myself, and I had a job, which was great. And we used to do the midnight to dawn shift because he found it very hard to sleep. Some things had happened to him in wartime that he'd never been able to process. And that's the part of the PSD, of these people that we asked to go and fight for our country in these strange, weird, in these other places around the world, and they come back home and he'd never gotten over what he'd had to do. And so he couldn't sleep. And he would talk to me about the things that he'd seen and things he'd had to do, you know, for his country. And he was a beautiful, beautiful human being. And he used to take me away with his family. We'd go down to Lorne and go sailing and stay in a big caravan down there. He was a lovely soul with a great family, but tortured, you know what I mean? And so we would do the midnight to dawn shift. We would just bag, we'd stay up all night, just work in the mill. And, you know, that job, that security enabled me to save enough money to get on a plane to then go home to New Zealand, which I needed to do. So I worked there for probably 6 months while I saved up enough money for my airfare and just got myself back together. And then I jumped on a plane and came back to New Zealand. And I'm 16 and a half, 16 and 3/4. I think I'm close to turning 17. So obviously, given the circumstances that I left the land of the long white cloud, there was some music to face, which I did. I went to court. I remember writing an excellent essay, which the judge had instructed me to do on capitalism, which was my favourite sort of, you know, pastime, headache at that part of my life. And I wrote this essay that she loved and applauded. And subsequently, I got quite a lenient sentence, which mainly consisted of community service. So I spent a lot of time, I think, cleaning up graveyards, community centres, and did my time, integrating back into my homeland and my family. And so I was living right in the middle of the city. I was in a band again. We'd sort of reformed the Virgin Silkworms, and they were all living together, flatting in this kind of not a really great sort of townhouse. You know, there were more rodents living in the townhouse than human beings. But we were there, we had our freedom, and but I didn't have a job. And I remember that my Uncle Skip, we called him at the time, that was my stepmother's brother, he got me a job as a used car salesman, which is ironic really, considering some of the conversations we've had about cars. So I started as a used car salesman, and for me, I think that was really my first base entry level into acting.
Hi there, how you doing?
And the thing about selling used cars in New Zealand at that time, I got a job at Kirk Motors, used cars, Mitsubishi's mainly, was that they did a lot of, they were really up with the training. We did a lot of psychological training, you know, about people's, you know, body language and psychological aspects of buying and selling, which I found kind of fascinating. And so I started selling used cars, and I sort of, it just came very naturally. And I did very well. And I think I'd been there about 3 months, and I became, I'd sold the most cars on the lot. So I became the used car salesman of the month. And as the used car salesman of the month, you're allowed to pick whichever car you wanted to drive off the lot, for the month. And that was exciting to me. So I picked, in those days we had a lot of brush turbo cars. So I picked a Cordia Turbo, and that was a fast little Mitsubishi hatch, two-door. And so I'm coming to work one morning, I'm a little bit late. And obviously at that age, I just turned 17, I was the best driver in the world. I probably should have had some sort of, contract to be driving for Ferrari on racetracks around the planet. You know what I mean? I should have been in a private jet, just landing and then getting in my Ferrari, winning the race, and then going somewhere else. But I wasn't. But I was in a Cordia Turbo and I was late for work. So I'm coming around this overpass, this Newmarket Viaduct, they called it. And what it was actually the bit of the freeway that went over Newmarket where I worked. And Mitsubishi was just there. Newmarket Mitsubishi where I worked was just below me. So I'm coming over the overpass, and then I get off the off-ramp and I come around, and I'm going too fast. I'm doing 160, which is kind of stupid, right? And I'm coming around a slow gradient corner, so I'm doing a bit of understeering, oversteering like great race car drivers do, just so you could really hold that corner. And I'm seeing a Kenworth truck, a big semi-trailer up ahead of me, and I'm thinking I'm gonna have to change lanes in the next few seconds to go around that truck. What I didn't realise is that truck had broken down. And because we're on an overpass, there wasn't a breakdown lane. So it was right in my lane. So I come around this corner, having done my excellent steering, and then right in front of me, probably 100 metres away, is a semi-trailer broken down. I've slammed on the brakes, and I'm sliding towards this truck. Sliding. And as I'm sliding, I'm seeing this ad playing out in my brain, right? And it's this insurance ad. And in the insurance ad, you've got a little model semi-trailer, and you've got a little V-dub, and the V-dub goes under the truck. And I can't remember what the context was, but it was an insurance ad, right? And I keep seeing this little V-dub going underneath this trailer, and it keeps flashing and flashing as I'm sliding towards the truck. Keeps flashing, and just before I hit the truck, I finally get the message that advertising is trying to give me, and I dive under the glove box. So I'm laying down, sideways, with my head under the glove box. Bang. The car has gone completely under the back of the truck, and it's flattened to the boot. Now, I've been knocked out cold, but in a semi-conscious kind of state, I'm coming to and fro. I'm sort of, coming back to consciousness, losing consciousness. I can smell these funny smells. I can hear like gas or something, steam, bits of something. And then, unbeknownst to me, there was a gang behind me, a bike gang, New Zealand bike gang.
Judgment Day.
And this is where I go back to the angelic realm. Somewhere, for some reason, I was being looked after it. And in this incarnation, it wasn't my turn to go. Because I had those flashings of that ad that made me dive under the glove box. And then not only, I didn't have one Jaws of life, I had 25. I had a bike gang of massive, big Pacific Islanders, Māoris coming in. And I could hear in and out of my consciousness, look at this bro, he's really fucked himself, we got to get him out. And they get in there, and apparently they just hauled that car out, and they just pulled bits of steel apart, and they just got me out of that car, and they saved my life. And to me, that's kind of been a mainstay of my life. There's been these lots and lots of moments repeatedly throughout my life where there's been an intervention, whether it's divine, whether you believe in reincarnation, whether you believe in angels, whether you believe in guides, whatever it is. To me, it's undeniable that there's something there because it keeps getting shown to me. And for me, that was one of those little miracles where I got to live another day. So thank you to the guides, the angels, on that day.